fiendish, creepy, scary crickets. We're becoming all of that, folks. I don't know what else to say. It's that time of the year, and we're going into the fall. So how do we feel about that? Things are just as insane, actually, as I've ever seen them. And no one really seems to care, and those that do seem to step back instead of engaging what makes the insanity. For the past cast, this is BTWRLM186. And looking over what's going on, I'm noticing more and more, trying to figure out what do we do, how do we go, what's going on, what's working, what's not. And I see people just taking a step back and not really doing much of anything but engaging the nonsense. Agreeing to continue to walk with the insanity. And the problem with that is that even those of us that don't do anything, let it happen. And so I've had to think about, been trying to think about things. What's going on here? I've got a broadcast I do. I try to communicate things. For better or worse, people make whatever decisions they make about what I'm doing and saying. And for the most part, no one understands what I'm doing or saying. And I always see the big distinction. And I don't know how much clearer I can say. I can't show you how it works, how I see this. Whenever someone decides to find the wrong they want to make right, and has a question, and needs to find a charted course on how they might approach it, and they ask me, and I can help them, they start to understand almost immediately what I'm talking about. When they actually apply it to something, even as an understanding, you take, okay, what have I been missing before, and what is he saying? And let's apply what he's saying, and now I'm starting to see something. And this lack of integration with yourself, and this lack of intention is, I think, the biggest stumbling block. And until you focus on something, you end up just bouncing around, looking around for all kinds of stuff. As it was said last night in the chat, as I was preparing for the broadcast last night, I'm looking for nuggets. Well, folks, I'm a miner. I know what looking for nuggets is, but that doesn't make the job. You don't just look for nuggets when you're really doing something. You have to take the good with the bad, and you have to work through. And the way you get through that is that you have to work and move material. Most of the easy pickings, at least the ones that are on the surface, are done. Now we all have to go to work. And so looking for nuggets is fine, but it's really the recreational part. And it's exciting and it's fun. But to tell you the truth, I'm so far beyond that. In fact, I think I've told you the story. The guy who had a property that was within a wilderness area, on the map, his place was in white, in a sea of green. And he had pictures behind his booth that I went to in a gold show, and he had a bunch of pans of gold all over this big, giant display of all the gold they found on these claims that he's had. And I was more fascinated than all the gold I saw that he had pictures of, with the little white spot that was in the sea of green, because that represented what the law is supposed to do, what the law is supposed to give to us, and what we were to see and insist happen for us, the ability to use the land productively. And over the last 30 years, we've had a usurpation of that, and no one seems to understand and notice. And I keep telling you, this whole thing is so deep. It's mind-boggling how deep it is. And yeah, we do all the news and all this other stuff. This stuff I call you the notice. That's not even touching it. Like I told you on our lawsuit, we sued. Remember, if you will, there was a moratorium. Moratorium prohibited the congressionally granted property from being used. Completely unlawful. But these policies come out of a completely criminal system that has infiltrated itself into your legitimate government. That when we did our lawsuit, we first went to address that prohibition first, And right before I was finished writing the documents up that we were going to look at for the lawsuit, the one bill that had held out itself forever, we saw it come in early and it never came out of committee. It finally popped out. And right as we were thinking we had the situation made that we were going to sue on, which was to stop the government attempting to prohibit congressionally granted property and enjoyment, this bill came out, and it happened to do with the money. Remember, they always follow the money. And I looked at that bill, and I saw what it was talking about. It talked about leveraged funding, and it talked about things and definitions that were being made that were never ever done before. And I looked at that and I said, here it is. This is actually what we have to sue against, the money that implements all these other things. And so if we would have written this and hadn't been completely diligent on these points and really been in the moment, we would have missed the very most important part, in which we sued to stop the appropriation of monies to do the things that one of which was a prohibition. That I say this, I think I'm saying this clearly enough to show you. If you're not in this game, you will not see what you need to see. It's impossible to see. You will be looking for nuggets forever. You won't roll your sleeve up to do the hard mining that it takes to move the tons of dirt to get the minerals. And most people just think it's gold. I'm not that type of a miner. I'll look for whatever is valuable enough to pull out. Anymore, material science guides me to say there are minerals now that weren't even considered back when that I can now use to extract. And in that regard, and having more knowledge, I tend to try and do a better extraction for the time and energy we put into a place, given we get to do that. And that was the rub. This infiltration that I keep telling you about, that each one of you will not see. You absolutely will not see until you jump into it. You think I'm a nut, or you don't understand what I'm doing, or you keep looking for your nuggets to see if you get enough knowledge. And it really brings you to an insanity, actually, because, and this is what I spoke to about women that get involved in this, and it's not a slight to women. There's something in a woman's psyche that cannot address the ultimate problem that they face when they walk into this problem. It seems that the male psyche, the one that can fight, understands how to measure the fight, how to assess the battlefield, as I tell you as I speak. The woman has a totally different capacity. Watch out for the mama bear, though. Don't walk in near the cave or near the babies. But that's a short-term, intense fight. That is not what we're into. And I say this with the utmost respect of the women that I've worked with, and actually one that actually helped me to understand part of what we were dealing with, who literally appears to me has gone insane. Could not handle the complete crime that's against us. And so in this regard, this is no laughing matter. This is not one that we are able to look away. Those that engage will get hurt. And I've been in the business, if you will, if I can say this is my business, to figure out how we don't get hurt. Because if you go to real war, though I have never been in one, you get hurt, you're done. So you have to battle like you've never battled, or even if you've never seen it, and you have to learn on the way, and you have to pick up the tools that you can as you go, and you hope, and I was hoping that people would come together and become much more powerful. And I may have run across someone, again, links sent through the internet. I may have run against someone who's done an extensive research that I could never put that kind of time into, that part of the research that he's done we've been doing, but it's such a slow process in our journey along the enforcement side of what our default judgment did explains. He has come on to the very same people we did. What we did in 2013, he's found them all, but he's found the money trail. He's found also what amplifies and magnifies what we sued for. Not to stop a moratorium, but to stop the misappropriation of the funds that were all the acts of the government that stopped all production and the proper recognition of property as granted by Congress. So necessarily, I have to tell you, I'm looking at a system that I'm working through that has a function that did have a much better function than whatever all you have been thinking you understood. And so these things I try to bring you may be nothing, and the listenership maybe responds to that. But I started talking about this this view that I'm starting to see, an insanity. It's amongst even the people that I can say I love, the people that I engage with all the time, the people even in the chats. It's like this ongoing, it's just an insanity. No one getting onto the point of it, embracing what I would say the breads and circuses. And I'm just troubled beyond measure at some level, but I've also learned at some point, and I'm getting, I guess, to the age where, not that it doesn't matter, this is an interesting dichotomy, it doesn't not matter, but it doesn't matter at some level. Some of these things that I'm watching, this is the momentum. And there's only so much any one man or woman can do. But it's always amazing how few men and women together can do certain things. Like this information that came out may very well help extremely, in an extreme way, together with our default judgment, which is now in law, not an opinion, but something that cannot be denied. And this is what I keep saying. You're protected by working from your objective basis. That looking at all that's going on and looking at how people are being duped and accept being duped and put the ring of dupedness in their nose and walk with it has been very troubling. And I think I started to focus on this with this Dakota Access. And the response I got from my response to what I watched. The fact that I can come in weeks later in the same document I'm coming to expose the mechanisms of how people get duped. My trouble with people that will exalt themselves based on a culture and really not use those functions within them. They claim to use them and they won't. And this was another thing. Claiming to be something is not necessarily being that thing. And I tried it, and I didn't try. I did give you the information. All y'all that are paying attention, I gave you the information on how to better approach this whole problem. And again, it troubles me. Though I don't have the blood family, I guess. We all do have the same blood family. But I mean, in our sense of culture, I wasn't born into the accident of birth into the native people. However, I've told you, in this land, a family of 5 or 6 generations, I don't see the distinction now. In fact, in the treaties that are talked about in North Dakota, I see handed to the Indians the same rights as everybody, that only a few Indians picked up. I also see in the treachery, and I also see how decisions were made and agreements were made with the governmental side understanding that they had a different dynamic they were working on. In other words, you make a contract right, and then you take away one of the legs of the table that the contract right pertained to, and all of a sudden that disappears because there's no way to fulfill it. I don't think the people understand. As a matter of fact, I understand, and this is now I'm down to the point where, and I'm not going to get too far into this Dakota Access. I think I'm kind of done with it until I start seeing a better action. I'm troubled by it is my problem, and I don't see anybody. I see everybody doing the wrong thing. And the Bundy question, 15 informants, more informants involved, FBI informants involved than the people they charged. You don't think that's happened up there in North Dakota, just as I'm trying to tell you it's going on in different ways and to see different things? That you can't walk into a condition saying peace, peace, peace when you're a trespasser. That's an insanity. You can't disregard what I'm suggesting, because I'm showing you that the things that we do is experiential that tend to check the very things that people thinking that they have the nobility and the sovereignty to do are not actually able to do. And they continue to get played. And I have trouble with that. I'm not against them. But apparently they're so tight wrapped up with this, so emotionally wrapped up without thought and reason, an actual purpose, that I don't think it can be changed until that spirit is changed. And that's what kind of got me thinking this week. Something happened in discussion. Great people that I have been able to talk with long distance essentially through Real Liberty Media and all the people. And if, as I say that, remember 2 hours after my broadcast, Gary L. is going to have his rare broadcast now with a Suspect Sky, and they will have a special broadcast after 2 hours after my broadcast. Make sure you pay attention, you tune into that. But Gary L. and Gigi's Boo, instrumental, brothers and sisters in arms and otherwise. Never met them. All right, we don't meet each other. We just talk and chat. A long time ago, we were in talk and chat. Gigi's Boo talked to me, and I can't remember now. I'm really lost on some of these details. Told me a thing or two. And from the culture, Cherokee culture, if I remember this correctly, and please, if I got this all wrong, ma'am, that just shows how bad my memory's getting. But I think it was from the Cherokee culture of which she's a part. And out of the blue, she tells me that, and I am a little bit foreign to this, although I'm not. I mean, we all have had our nature experiences. Nature has talked to me, whether or not you understand that, and those that hasn't that experience won't understand what I'm saying. I have witnessed nature talking and speaking and communicating. I have been able to adjust my awareness by it, and I think for the better. That I've also been in disciplines of things to try and as we are people on the earth, what do we do amongst ourselves and try to interpret our reality? To lead you into saying, I've looked at tarot, and I found that I have a certain capacity to use those as they are meant to be used as a tool to focus, essentially, and to get into a space that allows me to look at stuff that I really don't tap into anymore. I think it might be more a part of me than I use the tools for. But there's never been a time that, and you don't do this all the time, you don't become obsessed about it. But there's never been a time I've looked at tarot and not for myself, pulled the Fool's card. Now remember, that's not foolish. There's a whole different type of interpretation. But it is indicative of the card, the man upside down, hanging by one foot. Looking at the world in a new perspective, seeing the others that appear to be upright, but recognizing that those that think they're upright may not be, and really not caring either, because he's hanging by one foot. That these things, in trying to interpret this insanity I'm watching, and trying to communicate to y'all, whether or not I do, I don't know. I'm going to communicate this much. Flash my mind back to Gigi's Book's comment and Gary L's comment to me when we talked about, and this is before Russell Means and his death. And so I was brought in and got to hear and see in a very intimate way the culture of the Cherokee. Again, I hope that's correct. A native view, essentially, that very consistent with my own journey through that part, which is still in with me. That understanding and being in that culture, at least as I understand it, the matriarchy is very powerful. And Gigi's Boo, being one of the matriarchs of the clan, out of the blue tells me, and I hope there's no embarrassment here when I do this, but I'm pressed to say this. I'm almost embarrassed, but I need to get this out to explain. There's a really bad thing afoot, and it's so bad I need to just talk of these things. She explained to me, to a little bit of my bewilderment. I wasn't unfamiliar with some of this, but it just didn't strike me. It never come to me the way that she told me so directly, that I was of the Wolf clan. For as unnative as I would be by most people's standards, I was already of the clan, but she didn't explain anymore. We talked a little bit. I inquired a little bit. But I never really made it too much impression with it. I didn't want to make that the ego thing. And so I didn't do the mental inquisition over what she meant about all that and what that all was. But I found that flash, that statement came to my mind in looking at this overall insanity. And it's not just about Dakota Access. It's just that the native purpose, the native condition, that they are no different than the rest of us, and we don't see it either, is so wrapped up together that it is one. It's not unity. Remember, that's the facade. Unity is the facade. Solidarity is the facade. In fact, I see so many people I respect that are cause-driven in the right way, using and picking up this dialogue, this language. It's killing us. That I really didn't research and study, and the language is enough different that I didn't understand it. But a word occurred to my mind over all these years. I don't remember how long ago she told me that. And I don't remember now. I can't find. I had it written down. I mean, I had it notated, but I don't see it now in my my notes here. The term for the wolf, I think it was, in the wolf clan. That word came, I think, to my mind, and you'll know. Those of you in it will know. Any rate. And I've learned to remember to follow up on these flash thoughts, so removed from me that I looked up a search, and the word came up. It's Aniwaka or whatever. Anyway, you'll get it. I apologize for not knowing the language. It's not been my focus. I understand things a little bit different at this level also. That I saw the word, I spied the word in a search term, and I said, that's the word I think she used 5, 6, 7 years ago. And so I started to search down through the list and found Cherokee. And I opened that up, and sure enough, on Guide, without too much inspection, is the information I'm looking for. And it was the Wolf Clan that she was talking about. And I think I did find the word. And so I wanted to see what, in the nature of things, in the native nature of things, what might I be, and what am I missing to understand this thing? I need to communicate the danger to us, and I need to communicate how we need to stop being seduced by deceivers. Act not out of our words that we fulfill the ancients, the elders, but actually put it in practice. Not use words to excuse our failures, and not use our emotions to claim that we are fulfilling those. And I say that because when I look into the situation, I see an insanity that's covering everywhere. This might be that darkness I told you about a long time ago that I couldn't see through, but I don't know that that's it either. I just sense there's things going on. That I looked into the wolf spirit, because to me, the wolf spirit hadn't come to me. It was only, that's why it was a bewilderment when Gigi's Boo said that I would be of the wolf clan. Didn't understand what that is. It wasn't something that, as I understand the native peoples would say, it wasn't a message to me by my dreams or by what I see in the forest that so many other totem animals might have been. Impressionable, doing something, interacting in ways that were pretty phenomenal, to send messages that I went into and found, and I don't have it with me here for some reason. It didn't get transferred. What the wolf spirit is and what the clan, wolf clan, is about. And I don't do a deep research here. I just saw things that were absolutely speaking to me. Speaking not to me necessarily, but what I've done. Despite my bewilderment of being told that I'd be part of that clan, what I have done since then exactly fulfilled what that clan would do in the spirit of the totem. That I, looking for this problem, and I raised the idea of a shaman, and this really starts to come very close, even though I didn't understand it a couple weeks ago. Let me just give you the totem that symbolizes, the wolf totem symbolizes strong connection with your instincts and intuition. I told you there's a whole other level that you approach all of these things at. High intelligence. Now, there could be debate on that, on the ego side, but I understand I do things that are, when you tap into that spirit side and you have the right intention, it looks like intelligence. I do enough dumb things myself, but when applying the intention and an instincts integrated, it starts to work in a level that's beyond intelligence as well. Loyalty and communication. If you haven't noticed how many years I've here communicating and loyal to that message and consistent with it, I just spoke right to what I was doing. This is not because I believed that I was looking at a list of things before, but they sure speak to me right now, that I think my record proves this out, that I've been doing this. A deep desire for freedom. Now, I take the word freedom in this case to be being free. That's all the cause is, to explain to you how to extricate yourself from the oppressions, even and because of the level of infiltration and surrounding that we suffer. So the symbolization of this wolf clan is what I have been doing, regardless of whether people reject me or not. Now, one other thing I found, and I don't know why I don't see it, I have a couple problems in transferring some files, and maybe it just got lost in all the harassment that trying the nuances of this thing. That I recognized too, I was told in the information, and I just found it. The wolf represents the pathfinder. He is a guide that helps you discover when you are being misguided or led correctly when using your instincts. Folks, how many times have I told you, it's not what I'm going to do, it's what you're going to do, but I can put you on the trail, I said it this way, of what you can do the best and the fastest. And once I put you there, it's up to you to go down and find what you're going to find, utilizing what I'm telling you're going to find as cues and clues. That doesn't speak to this symbolization of being a pathfinder. Understand that means I've been there before. It means I can tell you what you're going to find, at least in a general sense, but I can't know your travel and your journey. Isn't that exactly what I say? Repeatedly for years. That the elements that constitute and symbolize the wolf totem are what I do behind the woodshed. That as a pathfinder, I am not someone to be disregarded, and that's not to exalt myself. I am feeling very uncomfortable saying this, and I'm feeling very humbled to be identified to be then coming later, years later, to find out this is what I've done, and the matriarch of the clan had said so. I don't take any of that at low value at all. It's not disregarded at all. It's been in my mind all this time, and to come to today to find out that I am fulfilling what she said would happen, that I didn't know. And while I cannot take on, and I will not, it's not my place to take on any higher level within the Wolf Clan purpose of war and peace, and what it does to protect the tribes and the clans, in the concept, the intention is that I do that despite whatever anybody might say. That being the loner wolf means exactly that. That the loner wolf had to go out and learn the lessons that no one that never left could possibly understand, and that the purpose that I would have would be to protect. That looked a whole lot more substantial than the water protector I see and hear about. That I've shown you that isn't what they claim. And if they think they are either insane or they are misguided. That this totem, given to me by a matriarch of a clan, proves out. That I don't really take any of this so lightly, and I just kind of go through some of these mechanics. That I am so troubled about what's going on, and I really care so much, even though I don't care. I don't care because at one level, not that I don't care again, but I cannot change those that don't want to hear, don't want to see, caused by any excuse, and don't maintain a path, their journey that we're all on. That I don't know how to place this more without, and I don't know how I'm not going to insult a whole lot of people. That I literally have to claim what I was told I was, despite my my lack of actual response. Otherwise, my own example in my walk through life, the other totems that came before me to guide me in my thoughts and my failures and all these other things. But I have to come today to say, my record shows I am the pathfinder. My record shows that what I speak to is to cause us to be more free. That I am loyal to that and to persistently communicate that to you. That there's stuff beyond us that comes to bear that I do not disregard and try to use in a very difficult way. You can't put into words certain things. That appears to be of a higher intelligence, and I have to accept that. I know I've had to put my own in, and I've been more intelligent because of it. Applying your mind is like a muscle, I suppose. That I have to claim this part, to say and agree for myself against everybody's criticism. Again, remember, I'm the fool hanging upside down. I don't really care either. But I care enough to take a new perspective to find the things we need to find to help us. That the lone wolf could care less against the criticism when he knows the truth because of his experience outside the social structure of the culture. That comes back to say you're in danger. That I have to say I'm fortified in being called into this without my real awareness, that I fulfilled it over numbers of years to say the people in North Dakota, the natives, the people that are coming to support that, the things at the Bundy Ranch, the things I talked to you about in all these different matters are the paths you shall not take, that if you do take those things you think you're doing, you are on the path to destruction. That if you don't get your collective community heads out, you are going to watch your destruction, the ongoing, continuing destruction of your lives, all of our lives. I say that as the pathfinder. You can disregard it. The reality is going to hit you square in between the eyes. Whether it's a rubber bullet, it's a baton, a lead bullet, a shield, government law, whatever, a knife, a gun. I'm so struck and disappointed and sad of what I see purporting to be news, notice, information. I mean, I just saw a video, earnest as it sounded like, after you listen very carefully, it starts to fall apart. And I still haven't found the veracity of the statement that some 11-year-old girl was shot by a sniper up there. I cannot confirm or deny that story, but you know what? There was so much insincerity in the actual information that I had to discount it until I can find out for sure that it actually did happen. It had sounded no different to me than that story I told you about, that the so-called alternative media claiming that there was swarming cops. And you look at the video, and thank you to the one party who went to look at that video, and you did it right. You didn't take my word for it, and you went to look. But you didn't send me an email that said you're right or wrong. So I maybe didn't impose that. But thank you for being the one that went to look at that video off the Blogcaster for you to decide. Not listening to what I said and denying that to yourself was wrong. To accept what I said without going and watching it for yourself was wrong. So thank you to the one that went. Now, how do I know that? So it's not all spooky. In the back of the websites, we've got these monitoring things that keep track of clicks, like everybody knows. The clickbait stuff, well, it's not really clickbait on RLM. It just keeps track of the pages that are gone to. That's all how I know. It's not more sinister than that. And it's really just a number. It doesn't mean nothing to me. It doesn't tell us where. I have no information about whoever's doing those things. I just have a number that somebody clicked someplace. I'm going to tell you the truth. Another aspect of that is, for me on another website, totally different than RLM, I've been using those clicks to find out if I've got people trying to hack the system. So I find that there's a very important reason to have those too. But anyway, so I can tell that there was one party that sent, but nobody sent me an email to argue that I was wrong or to concur that I was correct. And this apathy is really discouraging, because I'm realizing that the apathy on the rest is the agreement with the insanity to allow it to continue. And we may very well have an 11-year-old girl got sniped, although I don't know. I think this is the psyop you see that the Ammon Bundy thing came out to be. It may be, actually. I need to return here and then move on. Today, I understand, and this came to me a few days ago, in understanding more about this wolf symbolization that was predicted to me to be outside of my awareness, and then furthering not settling to study it at all, that it comes up back today in my own inquiry and trouble, was very fascinating and powerful and certain. There was no question what I read applied. No equivocation. Those are things, the standards I read. Those of you that don't think so, markonthebeast@yahoo.com. I'm not talking about your opinion on whether or not I have the right to say so, because I'm saying it. I'm saying if I was wrong in my view about my record that proves that I do fulfill these standards, whether or not I would fulfill that. I'd like to hear about that. markonthebeast@yahoo.com. But we have an insanity going on. We have people discussing within themselves the noble path that they aren't actually following. As I said before, my simple question right now, as I've heard now, I'll bring up another point about this, is that my question right now is where the people are protesting. Is that private land or closed due to construction land, or is that the reservation, or is that actually land that was within a different holding, maybe a private holding of an Indian that qualified some outlet in the treaties? Nobody will say in this factual analysis. Now, I've heard it said that those are disputed lands. That's not good enough either. A dispute requires a remedy, bringing to the bear into the public arena that dispute actually, not the surmise and conjecture that it's there. And so, until that action, which has a remedy built into it for the dispute in those lands to be answered, the people, given it's not on the reservation and it's not on the main highway that's not being blocked, the people that profess to be peaceful are aggressors at the point of any trespass. And I don't know if you've all studied it, but when they come in the numbers that they're coming, the cops are absolutely correct underneath the regime that we are under to do whatever they deem reasonable. It's not up to the alt media. It's not up to the people that are getting themselves beat up and whatever the heck, tased and bulleted, because they put themselves in a condition that there's remedy otherwise. That if you can't, as a people that are doing that, don't stop and look and see the reality of what you're doing and go first and look in the remedies that are accepted by this oppressive system, nonetheless oppressive, you are considered the aggressor. That you continue down that path, and I will tell you you're proceeding to your destruction. You're proceeding to your future destruction and the future generations' destruction, just as it's planned for all of us. And as the fool hanging by one foot, taking the new perspective on the world, I don't really, at this point, I don't care that you disagree with me until I see that by my experience, folks, that's 3 decades. I don't exalt that. I'm always looking for somebody else to match me because I need some help myself sometimes. The people I get to talk with is very few. Explaining how lone I am in this view. That at some point I have to give in to the insanity, not to concede it, but to explain that there's nobody to change it but you all. I am the pathfinder. I can take you to the path. I just can't make you go down it. And I can't force you to be standing there. You have to make the request. And on those paths that I've taken, I can explain the rudiments. I can give you some landmarks that you can take to go down and prove as you go that I was correct. With the knowledge that you have to take those steps yourself. And you are going to find out your truths, your powers, your talents to apply to your problem or the one you perceive. And I ask you then to come back and let me know what those good things were, because that will make us both empowered. That you reteach me will empower you further at levels you don't even understand. In other words, to me to come here to broadcast to you, it takes a whole different level and consideration and humility. Again, you can't be wrong once doing this stuff. That the declining listenership, the affront, the critiques that don't come with proof, in my experience, and I freely give over what I might have to give to you, to be critiqued in the negative without test is a sign of insanity. To profess to be what you're not is a sign of the times, I should say, and that has to stop. It's not that I'm judging any one of you. I know that most of you are, those that are doing this, are earnest. I'm telling you, you do not have the actual spirit you claim to see the things that are transparent to you. That's a path I have been down, and I continue to willingly go down because it's an exposure path. In other words, seeing the transparent is a trick. And it's only the trick to stop being deceived. And you expose those who are against you for who they are and what they're doing. Ran across an article that was sent to me again. I find a lot of my own, but the people I work with, they're finding their stuff too, and lots of stuff to read. Conservation biologists popped up. No different than a stakeholder. What is a what's an adjective scientist? Conservation biologist. What's the science they're actually putting out? And I'm speaking relevant to this DEPL. They want to talk about the science, the culture. Who are these scientists, these social scientists, these adjective scientists that pop up? Remember I talked to you about adjective policy. Adjective policy is not law. What have they allowed? What have you allowed? How have you allowed for yourself to be deceived? Hasn't even a question that I hear anybody asking. Instead, there's an arrogant disregard of that inability and those ignorances and that action despite that ignorance. That in my side looking in is so quickly either not engaged that way or engaged more properly. That to disregard these things is a sign of insanity. To puff up things that aren't is either a criminality or it's an insanity. It's certainly not correct thinking. It's certainly not using the spirit, the instinct that we have. It's driving sheerly on emotions. And I don't say that those are unimportant, but they can't overwhelm the facts and reality. Now you're living in delusion. Now, I've gone on so much farther than what I was thinking, but there's so much problem in this. I see us as a people being destroyed. I've watched it for a long time. Y'all that have the same mind, the choir, if we can call it that, understand this, but I don't see enough of us really doing what we need to be doing, and I don't see us responding in the way we need to be responding, even those that earnestly think that they're in it. I'm pausing because I don't even know where to go from here. I keep thinking about those nuggets I heard about people searching last night. Keep searching the nuggets, folks. It's not going to get you really anywhere. It's not going to do the productive power that you have. You're going to listen to the next nuance. Oh, where's the next treasure that the Dutchman lost? Is that the kind of nuggets we're looking for? Or is it really the down on the dirt, feet to the ground application of addressing those that have invaded our land and taken it away for us? And this is an amazing time. I don't know if people are paying attention. This is an amazing time. This election cycle, not about the candidates. What's falling out around these candidates and the interaction is giving us an insight that I told you we have a target-rich environment. You're seeing it in spades. And I see nobody actually attacking the right things. They all engage with the breads and circuses here. And we are being handed the answers to stop this, if we never knew them before. My question about WikiLeaks set aside, or Assange set aside. Don't know what the motive is there, but we'll use what we can. We're in a battlefield. We need weapons and tools, and we need tactics, and I'm going to pick them up wherever I can. And as I said that, I got a couple of people got pretty surprised when I said last week about being not political, but asking you all to vote for Trump. Why? Because with Hillary, I'm condemned to 10 or so more years or the rest of my life. I don't have the spirit doesn't, it may be moving on here whenever. I don't have a choice of that one. At the short end of this, I'm already way past my due date, familially. On the other hand, at the best time, I've still got a few more decades. So any time now, folks. But they're waiting for those of us like me to die. That if we don't get it together pretty quickly, and we don't use what we're being handed right now by whatever reason, we develop the weapons that they've been using against us, and we take those and use them against them right now that are being handed to us that were never been available to us before. That will be shame on us. And there's really nothing more I can say to that. There's no amount of pathfinding I can do for you all. There's no amount of suggestions I can do. There's no amount of excuses you can make that it couldn't happen. Because maybe my style was just not quite right to change the problem and the destruction that's going to happen to everybody by a few that sit in places all the time. That it was a surprise I would say you vote for Trump. Why? Because we absolutely have a small window of opportunity to move a major amount of work that we've been doing into actual fruition. That when I look at the reality, and I have a criticism too, Gerald Celente, I like him a lot. I like the way he communicates. I mean, but I asked him in the emails, because he keeps going on and on about the last debate. I said, listen, Gerald, we have a reality happening in January. The reality is one of these two people is going to be the president. What do we do with that in January? You know he won't answer. He hasn't answered. A simple question. You're the trends researcher. I didn't be slight about it. I just asked him, the reality is one of these people is going into office. What do we do? And he has no answer. No, not a judgment. I don't think anybody has an answer. What I'm saying is we have to go to reality. We can talk about, as I said last week, we can talk about all the nuances. Oh, giant meteor. Yeah, I love that. None of the above. Great. We, fantastic. Me, fantastic. Waste your vote, even if you don't. See, locally your vote counts, so I got to be careful about this. You all have to be careful about this. But when in reality, when the reality, the rubber meets the ground in January, what are we facing? I asked you all that have not made your decision, that think you're going to not maybe do something or vote and throw it away. It would help me if we get the opportunity, at least the slimmest one that we have, that Trump be in. Not that I agree with the guy at all. I think the guy's a nut at some level. But I get the whole system's kind of nutty, isn't it? But with Hillary, we're looking at world war as far as I can tell. And if it's not, it's going to be on that edge all the time. And it's only an administrative functioning thing that we would have an advantage with Trump going in. But if I'm looking at a battlefield, and this may have surprised people if you weren't really listening, I am in a war. If you don't understand we are in a war, you're not paying attention. And in a war, whether or not I've ever been on a real war field, you take advantage of every opportunity, however slim. And that's on the basis of only the slimmest of bases that I even offer to ask. If you have a vote to throw away, why don't you throw it in a way that we might be able to do something with it? And that's a big question. But if you're planning on throwing it away anyway, I'm asking you, make the donation. A lot of people will not agree. Like I saw in the chat rooms, an anarchist doesn't vote. Well, if you registered, folks, you're not an anarchist. So let's just stop this stuff. I still haven't got to that anarchy nonsense I was talking about before. As I was talking with Vince. I said, when you have to understand anarchy is absolute. It's not adjective anarchy. It's absolute. And then I was thinking later, a few days later, and it occurred to me, and this is not absolutely true either. I think I know the name of anarchy. Anarchy is a condition, but I think it has a name, and I think that name is Murphy, to give you a better sense of what anarchy is. But you can't make an adjective reality out of it. It's absolute. It has no need to have a rule for itself. And so we don't get these concepts in us. The failure of that leads to another failure. And then you're not on your proper path because you're being led by the nose by somebody who's actually dragging you around and you haven't figured that out. And they're doing it in your mind. Move on here to some success. Some of these people that I really have a big question about, but I'm not going to the proverbial throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We're in a war. I'm looking for any tool I can use anyhow to advance the position that we have, to go back to try and get back something that was stolen from us that we were to keep. And I begin to understand the responsibilities so much more. I don't think people appreciate all these things. Those that have a sense of being free, they care. I'm saying that you need now to put that into a proper action. That's all I'm asking. And I have an insight for some of that. That I've talked prior, a long time prior. Again, I think this was, as it occurs to me, Gary L. I said, Gary, it was really on the real natural life, the real natural occurrences like earthquakes and sun and radiation and irradiations and temperatures and, now with the computers we have databases that we can all tie together. If we had people that could write the programs and tie these databases together so we could all start looking at the information, the quantitative information, hopefully of high quality, and we could start having a new awareness of this reality, this nature that we claim we want to protect. In order to come to new awarenesses of our reality, to be able to engage with it better, was a discussion I've had years ago. Wishing that someone would pull it together. I wish I had the mentality to do it myself, and I don't. But someone's coming closer. They're pulling information from databases. But not any less important was the databases of information that are available to us as we're being oppressed by the system that has failed, and you see now that what's falling out of the corruption, the money, follow the money on what's going on. It's not just corporation folk. Those are the outside bodies of what's moving from the inside of the so-called politicians, the representatives, actually taking what they said was an office of profit to their profit, which was supposed to be a violation of law. And it's so pervasive now. You're watching this thing fall out. That we need data against that. That this statement from The Intercept, which I have a problem with as far as a objective source, actually. I don't know what's actually going on. They came out with this, and I had to concur. This is what I've been telling you we need, and this is the information that we would need together. Now, if we work together, we will be much more empowered to address the oppression that's coming on us, that if we don't, we'll be helpless to. Open data projects are fueling the fight against police misconduct. Open data projects. There's a lot of people working on one thing, and to give information that's valuable information, not this nonsense opinion, the qualitative or quantitative values that you need to become powerful in addressing these criminals in office. A 16-year-old foster child from Far Rockaway, New York, had no criminal history when he was arrested in September, accused of having pulled out a gun and fired one shot in the air. Even though he had no priors and no relatives who could post bail, a judge set the amount at $100,000, and as he sat in jail for over a month, the boy lost his spot at the foster home where he had been living. Sita, a legal aid attorney representing adolescents charged as adults in Queens, thought the allegations against her client were dubious and was looking for a way to get him out of bail. That's when she decided to look into officers named in complaint against him. What she discovered stunned her. The arresting officer, she learned, had been sued several times in the 1990s. He had been part of a group of officers working a narcotics operation that was accused of planting drugs on people and stealing drugs from suspects. Some of the officers went to trial and were convicted of felony charges, but most settled, costing the city some $1.2 million in damages to their victim. The officer she was researching was acquitted in court, but he had been named in connection with at least 9 separate misconduct cases and had settled at least 2. Intrigued, Sita looked into a second officer, a sergeant who had claimed he had watched her client pull out a gun and shoot it. He was also named in a pending lawsuit, which a driver alleged the officer had stopped him, assaulted him, and arrested him with no legal justification. I thought, wow, that's outrageous. 2 cops in one case that are dirty, Sita said. When she looked into the third officer, another sergeant who said he had found a gun on the street after her client ran. After her client ran, she was almost expecting to find something. And in fact, the officer had also been sued in assaulting a young black man moments after he walked out of his sister's house. The lawsuit alleged the officer had thrown the boy to the ground and roughed him up before arresting him and taking him to the police precinct, also without legal justification. The boy was never charged with anything, but his family sued the city demanding $100,000 in damages. The accusations against the officer didn't automatically imply the guilt of the case, Sita said, but they certainly raised red flags. What's the point of all this? She's looking and going through a database that has been created in this open data project for tracking police misconduct, that some people are pulling together their talents to offer them openly to other people who need this data to show what was otherwise invisible and transparent to everyone, to start to get more with terms with these things, to prove, as I've been telling you, you have to bring evidence. Stop your opinions. Stop your conjecture. Stop the excuses. Just settle down and bring the fact. That there's people now with databases that are available openly to expose these criminals in the office that we've never had before. I absolutely commend those people that are working to do this. Again, I don't know where your talent and skill will be to help, but any of these things, you find a need, if you have the talent to fill it in and let people know about it. This is one of those things. You get the link in the blogcaster. The point is, we need this data to overcome the presumption that government does good. You're in a reality that works against you. You are not innocent until proven guilty. In fact, the Bundys were not determined innocent. They were just not guilty. In fact, a jury, we'll maybe get to this, not so much time today, we may get to this, but a jury actually says, don't people know you're not innocent if you're not guilty? That not guilty doesn't mean innocence? Why don't people think of this? They won't let you plead innocence in the legal system. You're guilty of something. It's just a question of whether or not they can meet the burden to prove it. So open data is information. Quality open data is going to be quality information that any of you all can use. And this happens to be just in police misconduct. I'm sure there's more people that can pull more databases together and create programs that synthesize the data to understand it so that they can be used for a purpose. Not to use to berate anybody, not to be used to say, oh, look how much I know and how much I can amass, regurgitate the restatement of all the data. No, to make certified evidentiary findings against a system that has put itself in place and presumed to be acting lawfully. It was probably the biggest crime against the people that I can imagine ever done. We have tools, folks, and I commend this one highly. You might want to look into this. Those of you looking for cops that are beating down on you, or know cops that might be beating down on you, you might have a database ready to go, or one that you could create. Find out how they did it. If you have time or you have the talent, find out how they did it in their area. If it's not a nationwide one, make one in your area. We're going to need tools. Despite the apathy, we need tools. We need to be able to go someplace and get information. Those of us that are doing things on the pointy end of the spear need this information to help. Like I was saying, getting a link sent to me to find out that someone's done a ton of research on tracking the money behind all the people we sued and more, on the method that we sued to stop and enjoin, and finding there's a conspiracy trail that can be tied to financial statements. That's probably the best type of information you need and you can get a hold of. This nation is about finances. You find people messing with the money, and your case just jumps up in merit about 10 times, if not higher. And so we need to support these databases as well, whatever we can do. Now, in the concept of the courts and the injustices that go on and the furtherance of this oppression around us, I just wanted to turn to quickly, the Supreme Court turns down the Hague lawsuit appeal. For those of you in the public lands, public domain issues, the Wayne Hage estate did get a very large legal victory against the government for harms done to a property owner and water rights, and in the district court, where a Judge Robert Jones ruled that Hague's cattle could legally cross federal property to access the stream in which he owned water rights. The judge also found the federal officers had engaged in literally intentional conspiracy against him. Now, then it goes to the Ninth Circuit. And the Ninth Circuit has been found to be 71% wrong. And so, this is how they play this game. Ninth Circuit reversed that decision earlier this year, ruling that the water rights owner doesn't give the ranchers the right to run cattle across federal land. Now, folks, I've done a lot of studying. When you have access to a property, you have right to it. In fact, it's in the mining law that you have access to that water. And anytime you have right to something that's granted to you, you have a right. In other words, that's why you can't have a property that doesn't have a road to it. And yet this Ninth Circuit made this decision. I want to remind you, this Ninth Circuit sits over as an appeals court to the territorial courts, the USDC courts, of which the Bundy case was. And I want to point out how they do this. And the Supreme Court not taking the reversal allows the government to get away, and the Hagues are stolen from the harm that's created for them, and a diminishment, a fantastic diminishment has been made against property rights and the right to use the property. Where the Supreme Court, when you look at it very carefully, is the court of last resort, but it's also the only court of origin, jurisdiction of origin for these things of very high treaty level concern. That they, in my view, are derelict. Well, given that they purport to be a constitutional court, they were derelict here. These Supreme Court justices were derelict in their duty to honor the law, to take the case, to review it, so that it was finally decided by the court, the highest court in the land. But this is the battlefield. This is why in our court case, not only did I identify that this Ninth Circuit couldn't take the case, I identified the district court couldn't have the case, and they weren't going to go to the Supreme Court. Why? Because this tract is not a courts of law. And if you don't understand these little nuggets, you don't understand what I'm saying when I say research 28 statutes, 28 USC 81 to 131, I think it is, and look very carefully and identify what courts they're talking about, then identify which of the two districts they mention are the Article 3 courts, you're missing the whole picture. That the Supreme Court ought to have stepped up and not taken this case, ought to have decided that the USDC court was not competent. Therefore, the Ninth Circuit Court that sits over these to look at appeals from those courts was not competent to render any decisions. And then pronounce the law for the grantee. Yeah, but who am I? I'm just a guy behind the woodshed. At any rate, again, that's the path. You can disregard it. You can make excuses for not knowing it. I didn't know that. It took me a while to figure it out. Methodical, point for point, unopinionated review of the laws as they are and how they're supposed to be done and identifying how that's not happening. And then to defeat the why behind how that's not happening. And now we move on to the big news in some sectors, and I think it's big news, but it's really not. See, this is an ongoing crime in my mind. So I got a little different view, but I'll go with the victory. These people should not have been brought up into charges. The Oregon militants found, see, this is news after the verdict, folks. This is how the media works on you. Oregon militants found not guilty. You see how you're not innocent here in this title. The Oregon militants found not guilty in unbelievable, truly astonishing verdict as the media is promoting it to people. A jury Thursday delivered a stunning, across-the-board acquittal of the leaders and participants in the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge occupation, and a remarkable blow to the federal government as it tries to tamp down a national movement led by a Nevada family to open lands to ranchers, miners, and loggers. And a very astute broadcaster observed himself, and I commend this other broadcaster, which I will not name, someone who's really come along to understand these. He wanted to know, well, isn't the public lands already open to the ranchers, miners, and loggers? I'll just answer for you if you don't know. Absolutely. So, this is the problem, isn't it? This USDC court, this United States District Court. What's the other one, folks? If you don't, you go, well, if the USDC court's not the court of competent jurisdiction, which one is it? Well, there's a District Court of the United States. Just invert the words a bit. United States District Court, by definition, is a territorial court. I've asked you, what territory in Oregon, what federal territory exists in Oregon that this territorial court has jurisdiction? That shouldn't be a hard nugget to go track down, to get the basis for the fact of the knowledge that says that these USDC courts are not competent to hear the cases that are before them, unless they're in a very narrow and limited type of case, which actually is within the territory called the Washington, D.C. The verdicts finding Ammon Bundy and older brother Ryan Bundy and 5 others not guilty in a federal conspiracy drew elation from defense attorneys who spent 5 weeks arguing that the armed takeover amounted to a time-honored tradition of First Amendment protests and civil disobedience. Maybe this is a lesson that's not the way to engage with these people who want nothing more than to just be heard, just to have a forum to talk about the injustices like the case of Hammonds and the treatment of the ranchers, said Lisa Ludwig, standby counsel for Ryan Bundy. Who, Ryan did not have counsel, it was standby counsel, and he wins too. So understand the dynamic here that he wins and didn't have an attorney. But it wasn't about, see, this is the wrong answer by the attorney. As I tell you, be careful who's talking about things. It's not a lesson that maybe should be learned. And it didn't turn on their First Amendment rights, as we find out a little bit later, as I was waiting to find out why the jury did find what it was. Was it a question of jury nullification? Was it a question of simply the burden not being met? Was it a question that the defenses persuaded the jury? And a couple days later, the story comes out. Federal overreach in search of more prison time cost them a conviction, says juror in Oregon's Malheur Wildlife Center occupation acquittal. Why did the jury, in the trial of 7 occupiers on trial for actions connected to the occupation earlier this year of the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge, acquit them? Just to get to the point, folks, essentially, because of the jury instructions, which were 30 pages long, and given what a conspiracy is, and given that the jury, this last stop that can happen to protect people against overreach by the government, tyranny of the government. You see the power of a jury here. I'm still not sold on this. I'm telling you, that's what this is. This does function this way, but we have a problem that everybody's missing in all of this that's being wiped away as we look at the acquittal thinking that was a victory. As I told you they would be doing, given that they would be acquitted. But that I told you before, the charges they were providing could not be shown to exist, and I said that they could not be convicted. That the jury didn't even look at it that way. They said, well, the prosecutor, they did it from the jury determined from the burden standard, which was absolutely proper. That the government did not meet its burden to present the evidence on the charge it brought. I felt very comfortable in their view, that I felt comfortable in the people in the jury. They took enough interest to look at it that way, despite anything I might say to the contrary about the competency of it all. And it wasn't about your First Amendment rights. It wasn't about your right to bear arms. It wasn't about the occupation. It was about the burden of the prosecution over what they tried to do, and they went for jail time instead of justice, as I can say it that way. And apparently the defense attorneys, such that they are, keyed into that. And they did make thoughts about that to the jurors, and it probably stuck. But there's, again, more information on why the jury, and I'm saying this because you've got to be very careful before you extend this case onto others and in other ways. Immediately, and I'm, again, the error of perception and attachment. As soon as this case came out, I saw lots of comments about North Dakota. This gives them the right to do what they did. The case was not turned on trespass either. Be very careful to attach the Bundy matter to the North Dakota. Be very careful to use a divisive color between the two as well. That's why I ask you to find out what the jury felt. Look at this. These will not be the consistent cases, and this case may or may not have bearing on anything else. In fact, it probably won't in a couple of regards. But that these people can, the Bundys and these people that got held wrongly all this time, can use it. Again, they gave him a lot of fuel. The attorney stands up after to try and, if no one's heard about this, to say, well, you got to free Ammon Bundy because there's no paperwork to allow him to hold him. He's been acquitted. You can't hold him for Nevada. And there was a consolidation between the two cases that he was arguing before, and I guess vociferously arguing before the court that they had to release him. As soon as he started doing that, the marshals stood up and essentially roughed him up and tased him beat him up, put him to the ground, and tased him. Now, I don't know if you understand how this works, folks, but the judge is in charge of those marshals. And the attorney has every right. In fact, I just ran across the court case in I think it's Cliven Bundy's decision from the Ninth Circuit that came out yesterday, denying Clayman's attorney representation for reasons that they claim right in there that Cliven can use. You don't listen, though. We've already talked to Cliven about jurisdictional matters. These Bundys don't listen to this stuff. A lot of people don't listen. No one listens to me. No one listens to my colleague. Despite we know the path. And so, they have in their own decision now that an attorney has every license to move forward and advocate as strenuously as possible, save a couple of things. And typically it's decorum of the court, and typically it's making sure that the things you're saying are the truth. Decorum of the court requires an assertion by the judge that you're out of order, you're evading the decorum, and that there's going to be a contempt. It doesn't include an attorney standing up and arguing in advocacy of freedom that it allows immediately for the marshals to step up and not have that judge tell them, you don't have that right, back off, let's get this solved, and here's how I'm going to rule on this, and now you can do your remedies at law. Free speech doesn't exist in this country. The judge oversaw this attorney, which is actually a surrogate for Ammon. They beat him up, tased him to the ground. All the ones that didn't have the hold from Nevada, the second court from the Bundy's case in 2014, they were not released immediately. No, they were treated and mistreated, as we get now evidence through the videos of David Fry's own testimony about how he was treated afterwards. They didn't treat him as an innocent man that had been wronged in the system. No, they shackled him up, they walked him back, and they put him in isolation, and they treated him bad for another 4 hours and denied things to him. And I want to point out the reality to the people that you're dealing with in the system. These are less than 80 IQ minus intellects. These are people that are absolutely mentally deranged in there. He kind of claimed that only some were bad. I'm telling you, they're all that way. Just push the button wrong and you find out what kind of beast you're dealing with. These people don't have the respect in themselves to realize that they had an innocent man in their care, and they needed to actually treat him like a regular people, not like a normal inmate. But these people don't have any respect for themselves. Oh, they'll talk the good game about all the law and justice they're imposing because that's their job. But you have to know the reality. These people are mentally disturbed, and they do not even have enough respect in themselves to see that in another. There is zero empathy. Do I say that to scare you? No, you just got to put your mind to that. May happen if you kind of step outside of what I'm telling you is going to happen. So there's this big deal going on about the acquittal. I'm with it. I agree. They should have never been there. But I do it on different reasons. There was no competency in the court or the judge. I don't care if she's determined to be an Article 3 judge. She had no actual competent court. It was a territorial court. There's no federal territory in the state of Oregon. The matters were of state concern. It was disposed land. I won't go on. I've already talked about all this. So this is what's missing. What happens now is the jury system is now exalted, and everybody misses the fact that they were sitting in a court incompetent to hear the matter, and all the attorneys take somewhat of the credit. And one of them, if you listen very carefully to his analysis of the other one getting tased, he says, well, it's unfortunate that he took it a little bit too far. That's a systems guy. That all these people were in the system, that what you missed, everyone misses in this acquittal, is the criminality of that court system that purported to give a jury trial. The analysis on the Cliven Bundy Clayman attorney thing is very interesting as well. They claim to be able to have pro hac vice representation, which means representation of attorneys foreign to the jurisdiction. But in fact, if you think about it, a territorial court of the United States District Court is not different from the federal position to have someone foreign of their system. And more importantly, the definition for pro hac vice representation is only in a common law court. The federal courts are courts of equity and admiralty. There is no common law court. The decision is a facade of the Cliven Bundy representation case. There isn't a common law court to allow pro hac vice representation. They do that for you to believe that there's some justice going on. They nonetheless denied him for reasons that they put up. But see, when it's not justified, they can come up with any reason. That's the scary danger. See, you got an acquittal out of this from the jury. We all go rah-rah for the jury, but in fact, they were not competent to hear the case because the court was incompetent to hear the case. How do I know that? Well, you just go like 28 U.S.C. 88 to 131. You start reading there. There's some court cases wrapped around that. Go through some of that study. Then I've got a judgment, a default judgment in it. Not the default against the people we sued in Jefferson Mining District versus Kitzhopper, but by the failure of the quo warranto, the default of the judge to respond to the quo warranto. And then he asserts an order that purports to say he wants to dismiss the case. In the first sentence or first paragraph, it says he has no jurisdiction. But the but doesn't give him jurisdiction. It gets him a place to sit in his seat, but that's about it. Where that seat is, it's not declared and not lawful. So there is no territorial court with competency over which a judge, even an Article 3 judge, can sit. There's no office found in a non-existent place, nor a jury to sit in a box that doesn't exist for the purposes of determining this. That all that haven't looked at it this way missed it. And as long as we keep giving credit to these these felons, folks, I keep telling you, this color of authority that did this to these people is a felony, 2 felonies on commission and 2 for omission. And then we find out all the players that were involved and the heads and the seats of decision of this are all tied to financial dealings behind the scenes. And then you have to ask, well, then certainly there's a conflict of interest, because these people, the Ammons and the Bundys and the Ammon Bundys and the Hammonds and the Hages and those of us that are mineral grantees, we're in the way. You will not get justice. We learned that as miners. 7 miners went to the same court up there. Didn't get the jury trial. They just beat everybody up, forgot the law, and threw all the miners under the bus, stole property, millions of dollars worth of property, machines got stolen underneath the lie. So do I tell that to scare you? No, I'm telling you there's a reality to look at this a little differently. You have to understand that reality. What's the nugget? Go read Title 28, Section 88 to 131, and then go read the notes. Like Cornell's a great site. Go read the notes on Cornell. You tell me where the Article 3 courts are in the United States District Courts of the United States. You should find 2. I'm giving you a hint. I've been down that path. You want to start getting a real handle on the corruption of this, you start really picking up the nuggets I am giving you and not making excuses that I'm not. And I'm pointing to somebody who made a chat. I'm not really focused on that comment more than that's the truth, and that's generically what people say and do. I think it's, if I got this up correctly, the juror said, inference, while possibly compelling, proved to be insulting or inadequate to 12 diversely situated people as a means to convict, the juror wrote. Quote, the air of triumphalism that the prosecution brought was not lost on any of us, nor was it warranted given their burden of proof. Perfect statement. They had a burden of proof they didn't meet. It is nothing to do with nullification or your rights asserted or any defenses that these people might have brought. But he makes he makes a misstatement that talks about the 12 diversely situated people. Is their status actually diverse? Well, underneath law, no. That requires that these people would come from out of state. Diversity is a different situation. All foreign to each other. Were they diverse in status? No, because they were all subjects of the United States government as a U.S. person. Different than a citizen of the United States or in its various statuses as well. And they had a certain thing that they got involved in to be able to be picked. A lot of it sitting in commerce. It's actually strictly in commerce. So were they a diverse body? No. They were of a very limited jurisdiction over a silent crime that was going on by them. Do I go too fast, folks, really? Even listening over and over? Here's the response by the government if you don't think these people are dangerous. They don't look at this no different than David Fry was mistreated after he was found to be acquitted. The government responds a day later or so. U.S. Attorney Secretary officials warn of impacts from Bundy brothers' acquittal. I find that interesting because when these agencies do their actions, they're supposed to be looking for the impacts, and they're not supposed to be doing things that impact man's environment, his productive capacity. No federal law allows that. And yet these people, the Bundys and others, were actually their civil disobedience, so-called, was not an issue for the jury either. That was not a defense. Their reason was not adjusted for. Their reason is not heard. They were the ones impacted before, that these agencies are supposed to not impact, which is another thing going underneath the bridge by the wayside. The U.S. Interior Secretary is urging vigilance following the Bundy brothers being found not guilty of crimes relating to a 6-week armed standoff in Oregon. The Bureau of Land Management chief echoed the message warning quote, potential impacts of the verdict. Quote, as we digest the jury's verdict, these parasites, as we digest the jury's verdict, our foremost priority continues to be safety, security, and well-being of people who comprise the federal family and those visiting America's public lands. See, she doesn't care about y'all, just her federal family. She didn't care about making policies and making a culture that would destroy people. She only cares about her federal family. This is the response to an acquittal, where the prosecution did not, the United States government, DOJ, did not assert properly the burden of evidence required for conviction on a charge that the jurors understood was hyped up. U.S. Secretary of the Interior Sally Jewell wrote in a statement addressed to all department employees, quote, in the coming days and weeks, I encourage you to take care of yourselves and your families. The armed occupation in Oregon was and continues to be a reminder that employees in all offices should remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity to your supervisor and, where appropriate, law enforcement officials. They're taking us versus them mentality, where there was no showing of threat at all. And I only want to point out this is the animal you're dealing with. They could care less about y'all. They only care about their own and how they're going to impose and impact you. They don't like that they're not going to be able to be impacted, and they're going to digest on this very simple jury verdict of acquittal. What's there to actually digest? So these people are just parasites. They've realized they're not going to be able to feed off of you in that capacity anymore, and that's troubling to them. Let me remind you, where she says, remain vigilant and report any suspicious activity, this is the same BLM officer that the Jefferson Mining District sent a show cause letter to, of demanding a production of show cause how she was not committing felonies and treason on multiple issues. So we did our part to tell her before Malheur, that she was doing a lot of things and allowing a culture to exist that violated the laws to felony levels and committing treason, making war on the laws of the United States as well. That we asked her to show cause how she wasn't. That the response of the government, for all the point that they say they want to have you be vigilant and report any suspicious activity, which is really not for you, it's for that federal family. This now threatened federal family. They're not any more threatened, but see, us versus them mentality always, is that their response to our letter reporting suspicious activity was to send the FBI and onto our chairman and then condition his air travel. That I know that she's a felon, that I know that she commits treason, that this is what they're protecting. So long before the Comey Lynch Clinton thing, we have the proof that we're sitting in a corrupt system beyond measure, beyond, folks. I told you that little story about our chairman and what he did, and the laws that he resorted to completely shut him down. But they did ding him for that free travel. Now he's got to go through the heightened scrutiny for his air travel, which he doesn't really do much anymore. But this is the mentality. This is the us versus them. This is not them doing the law and we live in peace. This is them making war and telling their employees, if you're suspicious, tell something. Well, we did, and we got the FBI on us. They didn't fix anything. And I want to remind you, we did that before Malheur. I will conjecture, because there's never proof of this for sure, that had the FBI looked at the failure of the show cause, of the failure of the secretary to show cause how she wasn't a felon, that Malheur may not have happened at all. But this is how these people respond to this. This is how you know it's them. They don't resort to the law. They resort to fear, terror. They resort to circling the wagon, so to speak. They don't work in the first instance to keep the peace. They instigate terror and breach the peace under color of authority. That act alone is a felony, at least even in this state. That the governor comes out after this verdict. I just don't, folks, I just don't know. Just despicable comes to my mind. Every time I look at this, this woman is despicable. This woman's an attorney. This woman is sitting in the office of the governor of Oregon. This is the office we sued in 2013. This is the same attorney general that's there that gives them advice, that working together, that's all they have the financial background, that we sued to and joined the method of their destruction of our Republican form representing government, and all the producers they're hurting and killing. Finicum was a producer. Under the excuses. Her response to this verdict, shocking, of the militants getting away with it. The statement regarding the Malheur refuge occupation trial from Governor Kate Brown, as I got from Twitter, quote, "While I respect the jury's decision, I am disappointed. The occupation of the Malheur refuge by outsiders did not reflect the Oregon way of respectfully working together to resolve differences. I appreciate the due diligence of our federal partners and stand with the communities of Harney County and residents of Burns." Governor Kate Brown. You know, she's up for election right now. And this is the other point, folks. If you're a Republican in Oregon and 100% of you don't go out and vote against it and go get your liberal friends to jump ship and go get the libertarian vote and the constitutional vote to vote against her, you have this despicable woman to live with some more that could care less about you. Her Oregon way is the way of destruction. I have a judgment in default against that office that she sits in, and she is worse in what she's doing. That she admitted to federal partners tells you they're in a public-private partnership, and they're no longer a state. She doesn't respect the jury's decision. If she did, she wouldn't say what she's saying. But here's why she's disappointed, folks. It makes her at least the accessory, if not the criminal mind that planned and allowed the murder, execution of Lavoy Finicum. See, they don't have this case now to a conviction to cover their criminal acts. That's why she's disappointed. This woman is despicable. She's part of the group of the financiers that are behind the scenes making laws and getting laws to work through to their benefit, utilizing these offices of plunder against us. The Attorney General of which, who had the duty to respond to our lawsuit, remember a default is where they didn't respond. They didn't respond. You understand the malfeasance in office that she's willing to commit? They didn't respond to protect the state. Is the same one that says, oh, we don't recognize any judgment against us. See, these are criminals, folks. You're never going to get a criminal to recognize they're doing harm or making crime. And that, by definition, was out of her own actions the point. That she's in league with this Governor Kate Brown. That if you don't think your local vote means something, I'm telling you, in this case, they do. Your local votes do. Now, about the counting, you're going to have to go look at your machines. Long time ago, before there was the Windows imposition, I was able to identify with my electronics background that these voting machines were tamperable, hackable. They had all the infrastructure inside to do reprogramming before and after a vote. In other words, my question was, why, if your program is set, do you have an EEPROM? EEPROM has this little glass window in the top of the chip that allows you to program it. You flash light into there and you reprogram the chip. Why was there an ultraviolet light right above that window and a phone connection line to the machine? if you couldn't erase that machine and then reprogram it. They use the ultraviolet light to erase the memory, and they use the phone line in to program that chip, like a firmware programming. That was the older technology. Now they do it by software. That's a different question than what I'm telling you about. Get out 100%, now you're going to start exposing these criminals, these despicable people. She's an attorney. Okay? The Bar Association was one of our the defendants that failed to answer. Remember, the Bar Association in that state is also a state agency if you didn't think this was incestuous to the core. She dare come out and talk in this regard that she respects the jury's decision but was disappointed was really just the couching of her disregard of law and the fact that she doesn't want you to know she's completely vulnerable to a murder charge here. You understand that when they were acquitted, Lavoie was right to go down the highway. When they were acquitted, they were right to not be blocked. They had a right to use the highway to get to their lawful use, which was to go do a public meeting with the sheriff. How heinous this act now becomes exposed. I hear nobody talking about it. And I'm not saying nobody is. I only get out to as many places as I'd get out. But if we're not talking about these things and rallying up together to now go after all this, we're backing up and we're going to be defeated because these people are so integrated. It's going to shock you folks. And I just, I can only put a smile on my face. There's other people that are working behind the scenes that do uncover the stuff that I already know is there, but I don't have the time to go find for myself. That you are going to be shocked how integrated the entire government system of Republicans and Democrats is in destroying your life and making profit for themselves. You've heard about it, but the proof has not yet been proven to you. And then I suspect when you all see it, you say, well, oh, there, we knew it was going on, and then crickets will not be satisfactory. That this governor, Kate Brown, is worse than Kitzhaber in the aspect of sustainable impositions and plunder. Completely into something else that comes up with this regime over the top of the people. Remember, it's not corporate and it's not from a local law. It's from policy, adjunct policy foreign imposition. Again, all this is in our lawsuit in a very finite and narrow way, but it's explained fully. And for those of you people I've been saying, go find the docket on our website on Justia. I just found out last night they've now put that docket sheet on a paywall. You have to go to Pacer, and that means you have to sign up for a registration that I'm going to have to find out whether or not we have a docket that I might be able to, and I get the Assembly's permission to put the docket sheet at least on the website of Jefferson Mining District so you can all see the nuggets. I was asking for, what are the nuggets? I said, well, there's nuggets in that docket sheet. If you know what those remedies are in the list of the docket sheet in the order that they were done, you have at least one answer. It's not a solution for every case, but you have more than a nugget. You have the answer to how you defeat a lot of these things and expose their crime. Again, I said we don't have the luxury of being wrong once. Not even in our lawsuit could we be wrong. I didn't realize we would be so right as they would be afraid to answer, or realize they couldn't, because we actually did invoke the Article 3 court that doesn't exist in the territorial system. But this Governor Brown is totally into this social inclusiveness and unity and solidarity. I hear so many people regurgitating out of their mouth, don't understand what it is. I talked about it last week, and I kind of ended here. I didn't get to this spot when I wanted to go on to make a more coherent discussion about all this. So let's put our mind back to last week if you listen. Understand where I was kind of going with this social imposition. This is one of the legs of the stool. These social justice warriors, so-called. There's no real war. They're telling you they're a warrior, but there's no real sane reason behind it. It's really adjunct policy in a different form, sufficing to support the stool, the international stool of the world order that we hear about, one of the levels of it. The social inclusiveness is becoming a real problem, to the point that even as we come to Halloween, tomorrow I suspect, be careful, don't be afraid. The University of Florida offers counseling for students troubled by offensive Halloween costumes. Do I have to read more? The University of Florida offers counseling for students troubled by offensive Halloween costumes. It's something you now have to concern yourself in your life when you dress up for Halloween. In other words, scary can become offensive. And that feeling now interferes with your right of expression. Is the environment that I was telling you what reflexive law will defeat in you, trying to be someone who just wants to be expressive. That the university academia is the center hub for the effusion of all this insanity and nonsense. That it's not limited to Florida. Police could investigate offensive Halloween costumes in a Massachusetts university. Is now the rollout of this social justice warrior safe space. I'm feeling oppressed. I don't even know all the words. I get sick of even talking about it. Students at the Massachusetts University are being threatened with campus police investigations and, quote, serious disciplinary sanctions, quote, close quote, if they dare to wear Halloween costumes that could be deemed offensive. Well, folks, there's a part of me that says, Halloween, you have to understand the backside. The whole Halloween thing is offensive. Let's forget the past. Let's bring it up to say the whole Halloween marketing thing is offensive. Let alone start to put something on to be something else. Folks, cops' uniforms are offensive, those Halloween costumes that they are. The judges' robes are offensive. Why does it stop for one day? And so I'm trying to show you there's a different way to hit this, and we can actually have some fun with it. But how insane have we allowed these global intrusions of policies and adjective agendas that will not work, are planned to not work. And we can find on some studies, and there are those that can speak greater on these points than or I will ever, they're not my focus, that we focus on this a core of people that keep pushing these gender identity things, these race baiting and the sexuality issues that are going rampant by a people who are supposed to be pure in their heritage, which can't be shown. And I won't get into too much. But when I saw this social justice nonsense and these imposition into even your First Amendment right to express yourself however you want in the universities that were supposed to be bastions for protecting all these things. What came to mind immediately with this social justice imposition with regard to the sexual perversion that goes on in the sexuality thing? As I said, I believe, and I have my evidence is that this is a continuing an abuse in people to allow this to continue and give social sanction for special rights. We're continuing an abuse that was programmed into the system, and we're actually aiding and abetting the abuse of people by allowing these things. That this kind of abuse and these kinds of subject matters cause my mind to think about a place in the world, and up pops in this very same time when this came up, this is about a week and a half ago now, or 2 weeks, UNESCO adopts a controversial Jerusalem resolution. The Palestinian ambassador of UNESCO, Elias Sandbar, flanked Palestinian Deputy Ambassador Manuel Anastas, speaks to the media as he walks out of the meeting room in UNESCO's headquarters in Paris on October 17th. UNESCO's executive board has approved a Tuesday a resolution that Israel says denies the deep historic Jewish connection to holy sites in Jerusalem that has angered the Israeli government and many Jews around the world. What I found fascinating is when you start reading these issues over the actual rights of the people that claim to be of Jewish faith, which we are to understand as a Zionist political state, you will not find the word anti-Semite in here. See, the main crux of my observation, notwithstanding the actual physical Britain-American imposition in this land that was occupied by all these people, that the Semite incorporates the Arab blood as well. The Semite includes the Arab blood as well. Is why you don't see anti-Semite discussed where the Palestinians and UNESCO decide that Jerusalem has no the Jewish people, I don't even know what to call them. See, they're just this fabricated state. As I understand it, the Jewish people have a religious belief. That's not a state, that's a religion. The Zionists have a political state. That's only a state. But they don't have any actual territory that's recognized internationally. So who are they to impose that you don't hear the term anti-Semite in these discussions? This culture that claims to have possession is also the one that influences our culture to a great deal. My mind says ADL comes to mind real quickly, that highly influence our military and our schools to come up with these gender issues, these sexuality issues, these race issues, these separation and division that we then have to live with, that we don't denounce. That when it was said that, wait a minute, you don't have a lock on Jerusalem by your own position, and the fact that you don't have one, and you have to share the space, these people didn't want to play equal, but they insist that you play equal. Israel suspends cooperation with UNESCO over Jerusalem draft. These are people apart, but they're not. They're all just like us. But they've made it so. And I don't know why we don't have a better voice against it, except for when we start seeing what's falling out of this election cycle and the corruption that allows it all to continue. The insights I have show us even a different path of how we're being at least occluded from those truths. That when the question of a people coming forward, it says, no, we have equal access to this, they said no. And yet I look over there legally, lawfully, and politically, and they don't have a claim to make until the international body to which they've appealed finally makes those decisions. That I was just, as I went through the two reports, I was struck by the absence of the word anti-Semite in a very, very important discussion, which explains the lack of authority the state of Israel actually has when you get it on the land. And until we start making, like I said before, look at the reality and get it to the land and make law from that's peaceful, you see the chaos that these people are causing. You see that these touchy-feely things are intangibles. You see that they're amenity-driven. This is the sustainability condition. So what I mentioned about a conservation biologist is not actually a biologist, not a scientist. It's essentially, when you get to the root of it, it's a political lobbyist under the costume, the Halloween costume of a scientist. And I'll be maybe talking to you about that document. That came up just recently. I haven't got to that yet. I'll try and high grade a little bit of that to tell you how this all works. And to me, I see these costume ones everywhere. Your judges are like this, the obvious ones, the attorneys are. The system itself is a costume. Then you get all the other people that come in, all these other uniforms that come in, all these other costumes, doctors and financial analysts, other experts coming in, scientists now. Now you can understand why science is a fraud, because it's actually an advocate. It's a lobbying condition of a political, what they call it in that document? It was a commitment. It was a values commitment. Well, values are subjective. There's nothing authoritative there. But they, as I read to you in the stakeholder document, they laid down their ethics and morals, and they picked up what they're told how they're told to think and feel. And that's what they advocate. And they don't care, is what you see about Jules. They don't care that you have a counter opinion. And why don't they care? The arrogance of the knowledge we read in the stakeholder, that they are legitimate just because they can impose their lack of care and empathy. And I see this all over the social justice stuff. It's originating out of Jewish interests that are killing us, that we have to get a handle on. Do they have no speak? No, that's not what I'm saying. So don't don't throw this out either. And I don't get that deep on it. These people are causing some trouble in our lives. They don't want to play fair and equal. That should call our attention to it, and that needs to be fixed. That's a reflection, as I tell you, the Middle East is a reflection of what's happening here. That all of a sudden that you have a special right, and you're going to say you're going to now fight with everybody because you feel you are entitled. And I look around, there is some entitlement, but it's not in the way that people understand. It's not the entitlement that I hear coming out of the people in North Dakota. It's not that kind of entitlement. And they're not doing the things they need to identify how to bring forward some very real conditions and problems that they have been remiss to really address in a more proper way. Instead, I hear a lot of stories, I hear a lot of exalted talk, and I see no examples of it. And I see anybody that comes to support it to speaking the same nonsense and actually misreporting the condition. Never, ever do I see facts that I can attach to the condition, ever. As I said, where in the reports does it say where the land is that people claim to be peaceful? If they're a trespasser there, that's not peaceful. That's an aggression. So the rest of it, I don't need to hear about it. And if you have a claim to the land, then there's 2 remedies that you needed to file before you start talking to me. And we don't see any of that. And I see people then all engaging, all the people I respect a lot, engaging this thing and embracing it, and like the Bundy situation, the acquittal, forgetting that there was no real right to begin with, and if there was, it was improperly imposed, or in this case, in the Bundys, it was completely incompetent, that acquittal. They should have never been in that court. And yet, oh, what a great thing. All these lawyers did such a great job. Oh, the judge now she gave great latitude. She's a criminal, folks. And she's a criminal at lots of different levels, not just because she oversaw the court and didn't kick it out, because she had no jurisdiction. She is in the story behind where the finances are. But getting back to this international connection to what diminishes us. Unity, solidarity, everybody's got their hurt and their woe, and they need to have their safe space. I can be offended by a Halloween costume. Well, that just destroyed your First Amendment right of expression and creativity, didn't it? In a system that was supposed to be the bulwark for protecting all that. If you haven't figured out how far off the track this thing has gone. That this agenda is global. Why I jumped over to Israel on the imposition of their imposition and policies when you go to try and have your own say, that they're going to say that you violated some principle of equity and equality when they won't even agree to it. That we see the fruition of what I've been talking about, there's global players that move global agendas along. The story came up moving into now from Israel and Jerusalem and the Middle East, and moving on over into the Saudi and Iraqi issues with the U.S. The United States, Saudi to grant 9,000 ISUS fighters free passage to Iraqi Mosul to Syria, from Iraqi Mosul to Syria. Now, the obvious answer to that is why not? The is us, and they're protecting their own. But what we might be missing is that this is another style of migration. And where have we heard that before? Age 2030. But United States and Saudi Arabia are agreed to grant free passage to thousands of Islamic State militants before the Iraqi city of Mosul is stormed. The jihadists will be redeployed to fight against this government in Syria. What right does the United States and Saudi government have to allow the terrorists they claim they're fighting to go and trespass into another nation? Is a fascinating discussion I think we could have, if it's a discussion at all. That the fact that they can allow it shows us again these are the tools of these very large and powerful oppressors, the United States and Saudi Arabia. If you needed any more proof, I'll stick on this thing. It just stuns me to watch all this proof that we are hurting people as the United States of America, and our own people won't step up. We get the election cycle speaks of nonsense. Nobody addresses these things, and nobody that was running is going to fix them. And yet I ask you to not waste a vote if you're going to waste it. Give me an opportunity, the one opportunity we see in this battle we have ourselves. We might very well get a handle on something to make something happen. Why? Because the reality is one of those people's going into the office, and to tell you the truth, I'd like to have the opportunity, if it's all possible, to give it that shot. We're already finding we're behind the times, but that's notwithstanding the fact that it still might be there for us. We're in a war. You take advantage where you can. You use the tools available to you. And if you don't see it that way, you're going to be missing it. You're going to miss the entire thing. And you'll be at least the fodder. You'll be at least the accessory of the crime against you, or you'll just be in the way. And you will never have lifted a finger, even the small, limited one that you could have lifted, even to do the most basic research to hand to somebody else that might need it and can go run with it like a baton. On this heels of this U.S.-Saudi allowance of is into another country to fight another government. If that's not a declaration of war, folks, I don't know what is. But there it went. That John Pilger comes up with a statement. I'll have you put in the blogcaster. I thought it was very important. Yeah, I like John's. When I read his work, I can almost hear his voice speaking the writing. He writes like he speaks. I think he's got a very good observation. I really don't know who the guy is. I do like what he communicates. He says, inside the invisible government, John Pilger on war, propaganda, Clinton, and Trump. And he goes through a discussion and lays out this whole crime against the Middle East that the United States perpetrates, and it's all its own people. And he leads off referring to Edward Bernays, the man who is said to have invented the modern propaganda, and how they control your hive mind, as I talked about last week, and how easy that is. He starts out, a silent war continues, led by the West, ignored by the media, writes John Pilger. With silent weapons for quiet wars, this is not just the West against the Middle East. This is the silent weapon against you. He talks and lays out how this works, what's gone on, how they've got it all figured out, they get you to think certain ways, and how they get you actually to think and disregard it so you become ineffectual. I thought that was pretty cool. Just slide that in there. That he sees it. He sees what's going on. He lays out the history. He exposes this insanity. How is it the United States and Saudi would allow ISIS to leave an area and go into another country to attack that country? Is the height of criminal, the height of evil, folks. I don't even know what more to say. Criminal isn't even good enough. This is all part of the plan. This is all to get people moving around, to destroy governments, destroy the peace of other people. As you raise up your resistance to the strife in your life because you won't set up and stop it, the same thing that happened to the Bundys, that happens to the Hammonds, to the Hages, that you don't see those people that produce for you. Myself, having to deal with the agencies, and I think we do a very good job at it. We're just not enough of us, keeping us from actually focusing on what we do, as small amount as we would do to bring all these people bringing little amounts to society for it to use and consume, is being defeated in us by this corruption that of everyone is crickets to. The evidence of which is all around us these last few weeks. I am trying to bring another nuance of what everyone's missing, to show you what the real problem is. And that it's an agenda that goes on, that the people that are doing it and making the financial deals through your laws to privately benefit are all on tap to a certain agenda. And still over in the European Union now, regarding Syrian refugees in Turkey, it comes out, just as I read to you before, that these debit cards are being given to refugees in Turkey. Now, what is that? What does that refer to? Nothing more than Agenda 2030. I have a link again. I put in the broadcaster, and it is Section 29. We recognize the positive contributions of migrants for inclusive growth and sustainable development. How? Well, they're going to now take a EU, and all the money comes from them and gives it to the Turkish government. That's an end around on giving the receiving nation the money, the development money. Thank you for tuning in today. This time is up. Appreciate, Grimner, your help and work in the website at thereallibertymedia.com and freedomsnetwork.com. with Diddy and UCY.TV with Jules and anybody else that's simulcasting the network, the broadcast. And stay tuned for Gary L. 2 hours from now, I understand. I hope I'll be able to finish the broadcaster. I appreciate him coming back in and giving his work. And terrestrial broadcasters, thank you for what you do and getting the signal out. Take care. I'll be back next week.